Thank you very much, Owen, for the introduction today. And I'd like to say congratulations to all the organizations and individuals who've put this together. It is really a fantastic event, and I'm humbled to be on a panel with such fantastic speakers. I've been having a look through at the attendees here, and I can see many colleagues from Turkey, but colleagues from all around the world. And this is really an area where we can all work together. It applies across the whole world. So it's fantastic to see great participation. Kevin Dent, Queen's Counsel, has given you a fantastic introduction as to what we're doing, and he's set out the legal framework for what we're doing with the Turkey Human Rights Accountability Project. If you're interested in learning a bit more, please have a look at the website arrestedlawyers.org. They're doing some fantastic work speaking up for lawyers in Turkey who are unable to speak up for themselves in some circumstances. The global human rights sanctions regime, which is a very new tool for us in the United Kingdom, is a brilliant opportunity to address impunity. It's very early days. This is a 2020 regulation. However, there has been some very encouraging signs, as Kevin alludes to. The first 25 individuals added to the list were in regards to Mr. Magnitsky, which is fitting. The next 19 are Saudi nationals in regards to the murder of the journalist Khashoggi. There's a Burmese general. There's individuals from the Gambia, Venezuela. There's Chechens who are involved in gross human rights abuses against the gay and lesbian community in Chechnya. Pakistanis involved in abuses in Pakistan in regards to arbitrary killing of individuals there, as well as those involved in attacks on the Maidan protesters in Ukraine. So it really is a great list of people to start with. There are some very stark missing individuals, missing people that you'll notice when you look at the list. I'll post in a link to the list. It's all published online, so you can have a look at the individuals. But for example, none of the Chinese nationals who are involved in the gross human rights abuses, crimes against humanity, and possibly even genocide against the Uyghur people are on that list. And it's becoming harder and harder for our government to defend not having those people on that sanctions list as more and more evidence comes out about what's happening to them. Of course, there are no individuals yet on that list in regards to what's going on in Turkey, but we hope to change that. Some of the cases I'll be speaking about, and I'm going to speak about three cases in particular, will show the importance of the Magnitsky measures in the United Kingdom. And the reason they're so important is, like in Russia, where Mr. Browder was looking for justice for Mr. Magnitsky and found none using local procedures. Unfortunately, the procedures in Turkey aren't independent or objective at this time. The high-profile cases my colleagues have mentioned before me really does demonstrate that. Now, the three cases I mentioned, of course, they're not the only three cases. There are other very important cases of torture, arbitrary detention, extrajudicial killings all over Turkey. But these three cases give a very good flavor, I think, of why the global human rights sanctions regulations are so important. I have three different types of victims, those who, and it raises issues in regards to the protection of those in custody, the protection of lawyers and human rights defenders, and the imputation of a client's case upon their lawyers, as well as the mass targeting of groups because of their ethnicity. The first case I'd like to speak about is the torture and killing of Gökhan Archikoglu. And I have a picture of him here, so we can really bring home what we're talking about here. And because sometimes at these conferences, we can get perhaps too legal, talking about the legal provisions, and forget what we're really dealing with. He was a history teacher. He was purged following the attempted coup, despite there being no evidence that he was involved at all. He was seized by Istanbul police on the 24th of July, 2016, on trumped-up charges of coup plotting and terrorism, and it's a common theme amongst those arrested that those charges are used. He was kept in the Istanbul police headquarters for the next 13 days before he died of a heart attack caused by the torture that he was subject to over that period. He was never officially interrogated. The police didn't even take a statement from him. So that really draws into question any statement from the Turkish authorities that he was there to be questioned or for any proper reason. He was taken from his cell every day to face torture, taken to hospital after being tortured, and then rushed back to his cell for the whole thing to repeat again. He told doctors about his abuse and the torture he was facing. In some cases, those complaints were not recorded, but there is plenty of evidence in regards to this case. The torture that Mr. Archikoglu was subject to was being beaten, slapped, kicked in the rib cage, kneed in the back, having his head banged against the wall. He had a medical checkup before he went into custody, and he didn't have any heart problems at all. The evidence in regards to what happened, the emergency services were belatedly called by the police after he had collapsed in custody, although the official records showed that he died at the hospital, but that's not actually true. Professor Şebnem Koro-Fincaj, an expert in forensic medicine, who's head of the Human Rights Foundation of Turkey, he's an executive in the Turkish Medical Association, examined the doctor's reports, the autopsy, and statements regarding the death, and concluded that this death was due to torture. There's been many witnesses, including journalists and other lawyers who were detained alongside him in Istanbul police headquarters, and they've came forward and they've given evidence about the severe beatings that continued for days. These petitions that they've put forward have been ignored by the prosecutor, who's declined to take depositions in regards to the death, and has concluded there was no official was negligent or responsible for his death. Now, as you can imagine, there's a number of people who are responsible and should be subject to the sanctions regime for his killing. And a special point about Turkish law, which I didn't know before I began working on this project, is that prosecutors actually have a responsibility for detainees and to make sure they aren't mistreated like what happened in this case. And that's a particularity. It doesn't apply in English law, but in Turkey, under the constitution, it does apply. As you can see, there are many similarities in this case with what happened to Mr. Magnitsky. The second case I'd like to speak about is in regards to the lawyer Erdem Seme Yildiz. This case has been mentioned by Owen at the very beginning of this conference. I've got a picture of him here as well. And he is a Turkish lawyer who the government of Turkey do not like at all. He acts in all kinds of high-profile cases, including representing the individuals accused of assassinating the Russian ambassador in Turkey. In March 2019, he was seized by the police and taken to Ankara police headquarters. And I did mention that these kind of abuses are spread across Turkey. He was taken there in handcuffs, despite being someone of good character. He was made to kneel in front of a wall. He was asked for his password to his phone, which he refused to give because of privileged correspondence. He was taken to the room of the department manager, abused, and he was told that not a single person left this police station without talking. He was taken back to this room later, and he was physically assaulted there. His clothing was removed on 2 occasions, whilst the department manager threatened to sexually assault him with a police baton if he did not speak. And this is the interesting part of Mr. Yildiz's case, and all this evidence has come out within court records in Turkey. But when he was being tortured, the police who were torturing him were saying things like, "Your clients aren't confessing and giving information about others." So it became clear the reason why they were after him is not because they thought he'd done anything wrong himself, because he'd probably represented his clients and some of his clients hadn't spoken when interviewed. They demanded to know confidential information from his clients as well. In interview, and this is where it becomes quite interesting, the prosecutor said to him again, apparently all of your clients are choosing to remain silent. So it brings about the real reason why he was brought into custody. He noticed as a lawyer the significance of that comment, and he asked that to be added to his written statement, and the prosecutor said it would. But at the end of the interrogation, he looked at the statement and that particular question wasn't there. His lawyers actually tried to add it, but that page was ripped off the front of the statement. The prosecutor, by that stage, having worked out that he'd actually given the game away as to why Mr. Yildiz was actually brought into the police station. Now, this case properly demonstrates the difficulty for lawyers in trying to do their job properly in Turkey. They can be subject to the same torture and poor treatment as their clients. These very brave lawyers on the front line against human rights abusers are being prevented from protecting their clients as they should. Now, this case in particular, you would have heard Kevin speak about the human rights sanctions regulations. One of the government's priorities that they've set out when they're looking for who to add to the sanctions lists is the protection of human rights defenders. So this particular case fits squarely within that human rights priority of the United Kingdom government. The last case I want to talk about, and you would have noticed we haven't just focused on lawyers' cases because abuses against all people in Turkey are very important, and it's very important to bring attention to them. The last case I talk about was a mass torture, if I can term it like that, in Helfeti, in Şanlıurfa. I understand that this is a town with a high percentage of Kurdish population. The evidence from this incident is from many different sources. So we have a 50-year-old woman. She came home at 2 o'clock at night and 5 people were laid face down in the garden. They were kept like this until 7 a.m. Her son and her husband were beaten. She didn't want to speak much about the torture to herself, but her lawyer spoke about electric shocks to the genitalia. There's a number of other victims of this mass torture in this particular town. I've got a picture of the town here, actually. One of the victims was a man of 60 years old. He had difficulty walking after what he was subject to. He had all kinds of injuries to himself as well. What happens to these people when they try to use the Turkish processes to report their own torture is a very interesting point. One person, when he declared that he was tortured, his statement was interrupted, and he was told that if he mentioned torture, his statement wouldn't be taken by the police. After he decided not to continue mentioning torture, his statement was taken. In other cases, there were threats to continue the detention of individuals. So individuals who said, I've been tortured in detention, would come to tell the prosecution about it and be told, well, do you really want to mention that? Because we're going to send you back exactly where you've just come from. Despite all these allegations, and this is a case really where there are so many witnesses to what's actually taken place, the public prosecutor has not fulfilled his responsibility. There's been no prosecutions or proper investigation. The Şanlıurfa Bar Association has complained to the Chief Prosecutor's Office, but nothing has actually taken place there. And they detail a whole list of different types of torture, physical torture, as I've mentioned, really, really terrible stuff, and the use of electrocution for torture as well. So I hope what I've said to you gives you a bit of a flavor. And these are only 3 cases we've been looking at. There are many cases where there's strong evidence of torture, where the individuals would fit perfectly within the regulations as set out by our Foreign Secretary. We hope that our project can help to address impunity, as the Magnitsky sanction regime all around the world is supposed to do. And I really do take some hope from what Bill Browder says about the effects of the sanctions. And the best possible thing as an international lawyer is when you hear someone complaining about what you're doing. And so hearing about the Russian regime complaining about sanctions there is fantastic. Another example of complaints which show that sanctions do actually have an effect was the chief executive of Hong Kong, Ms. Carrie Lam, who's been sanctioned and cannot hold a bank account or credit card, complaining about having to carry around bags of cash. So these sanctions can have an effect. Not only will they show the world what's happening to individuals in Turkey, but they will have an effect on the individuals who are added to the list. So I thank you very much for having me today. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end about how the regime applies in this country.